From Are You There, Vodka? It's me, Chelsea, Chapter 3, Prison Break. It is exactly 1 week after my 21st birthday when I got my first DUI. I haven't gotten another one since, but I'm not ruling anything out. My friend Lydia and I were on our way home from a night of heavy drinking, and we're midway through the second chorus of Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody when she punched me in the shoulder and slurred, I think you're getting pulled over. Huh? I asked, as I hurriedly readjusted my rearview mirror, which I had been using in place of a compact. I lowered the volume on the radio and turned my head around for a confirmation of what looked eerily similar to glaring red lights. Lydia was right, and I was getting pulled over. Fuck. I've always had a fear of police officers, especially when their sirens are blaring and they're behind me. Don't say anything, I ordered as I quickly slammed on the brakes and drove over the curb and into a stop sign. Lydia slurs when she's sober, never mind after 7 vodkas with cranberry juice. She also has a tendency to offend people who can help us. Earlier that evening, we had gone to a 70s revival bar in Westwood where the bouncer wouldn't let us in unless we were on the list. I'll handle this, she said right before she laid into him. What, you think you're special because you're a bouncer? Please, you're not an authority figure. You know you're just fat and stupid, right? Now, can we come in or what? Pretend you're sleeping, I barked at her as I saw 2 police officers get out of the patrol car. You weren't doing anything. Tell them you want proof. I'm serious, Lydia. Shut up. Do not say a word and close your eyes. Go to sleep. A burly officer in his late 30s approached my side of the car, while his partner tapped the flashlight on Lydia's window, motioning for her to roll it down as he shined the flashlight in her face. Lydia had to open the door because the window didn't roll down. For my 21st birthday, a week earlier, my father had shipped me a 1985 2-door Yugo with 1 working window. The year was 1996, and as luck would have it, the window that worked was on the driver's side, in the back seat. Forgetting my window didn't roll down, I had tried on several occasions to throw a cigarette out of it, only to repeatedly slam my left hand into the glass. I had started physical therapy a few weeks prior in order to get some of the strength back in my hand, but was having trouble making a full recovery because, as the therapist said, my injury was, quote-unquote, highly unusual. Hi, sir, I said to the policeman as I opened my door. Sorry, my windows don't roll down. I was trying to keep one eye on my cop and one eye on Lydia, knowing that any chance I had of getting out of this situation was going to depend entirely on my performance. License and registration was his hello to me. Sure, I slurred as I stood up, leaning one hand on my door. As I rifled through my purse for my license, I said to him, as articulately as I could, "Can you ask me why I pulled you over?" The officer smirked at his partner, who was asking Lydia to remain seated in the car, and then looked back at me. "I'm going to need you to step away from your vehicle, ma'am." "Ma'am?" I asked, trying to figure out how old I actually was, since I'd been lying about my age for some time in order to get into bars. Couldn't remember if I was legally or illegally drunk. "Where are you coming from, Miss Handler?" "Baja Fresh!" Lydia yelled from inside the car. The officer stared at me while I tried to think of anything that rhymed with Baja Fresh that would also be open at 2 o'clock in the morning. "Her cat died," I told my cop. "She's really tired." "Uh-huh, it says on your license." "Oh, shit," I said, and grabbed the license I had given him to make sure it was mine and not the fake one that said I was my 26-year-old Mormon sister Sloan. It was my license. I handed it back to him. "Sorry." "It says here that you live up the street," he continued as he pointed in the direction behind us. I realized then that I had driven past my own apartment. "Tell him you want to make your phone call," Lydia screamed. "You haven't even asked me if I've been drinking." I paused. Then I leaned in with my index finger pointed at him. "Because I haven't been, if that's what you're getting at." "Really?" he asked. "Nope, don't like the taste," I said matter-of-factly. "I had 2 drinks, that's all." "Okay, 3 drinks." "Tell him I'm at your cold." Lydia crowed once more from the car, which was now 20 feet away from where we were standing. She has a cold, I said, and then started again. I mean, we both have colds. We've both taken a significant amount of Robitussin. So if there's anything on my breath, that's what you're smelling. I caught my cold from a homeless person at one of the shelters downtown where I was volunteering. Please stay in the car, ma'am, I heard the other officer say to Lydia as she once again tried to get out. Go to sleep, I yelled back at her. Okay, Miss Handler, I'm going to need you to stand with your legs apart, your hands out, and your eyes closed. This sounded exactly as I had imagined my first DUI to sound, very authoritative and just like in the movies. I got into position and knew there was no chance I'd be arrested. I had practiced this procedure many times with Lydia late at night in our apartment. Let me guess what's next, I giggled. Touched my nose with my index finger, I suppose. That's exactly right, he said. Have you done this before? Yeah, I told him plenty of times. Had they not come up with any new sobriety test moves in recent years? I actually felt bad for him for a minute. It was a shame that the police weren't smarter. I did what was asked of me, and then he told me to walk in a straight line with one foot in front of the other. My heels are too high, I told him. I wouldn't be able to do that sober. Well, you can take them off or take a breathalyzer. You're turning into a real nightmare, I said as I leaned one hand on his large shoulder and took my heels off. Okay, you know what? I had one drink. One very small drink. This is when Lydia decided to slide over to the driver's side of the car and climb out. Ma'am, I told you to stay in the car, and if you don't listen, I'm going to have to handcuff you and read you your rights, her officer said. Lydia, stop it, I yelled. Sit down. Maggot was her next attempt at mollifying the situation. All right, miss, said her officer as he whipped out his handcuffs. You've been warned. And now I'm placing you under arrest and taking you to jail. Upon hearing that, I immediately fell over and hit the pavement with one heel on and one heel off. I looked up at my officer knowing this was not going the way I had planned. She always gets like this when she has a cold, plus with her dog dying and everything. Please don't arrest. He interrupted me as he helped me to my feet. I thought it was a cat. I thought it was her cat. It's a hybrid, I mumbled as I looked down at my freshly pedicured toes, wondering why they couldn't all just be the same length. Miss, you can either take a breathalyzer here, or we can test your urine down at the station. Which would you prefer? That depends, I said. Is there any way to detect marijuana through a breathalyzer? Lydia was now sobbing heavily, while also screaming obscenities at her cop as she was being escorted into their squad car. Let's go, he said. We'll take you downtown for a urine test. No, I said. I don't even have to go to the bathroom. Fine, he said, and went to retrieve the invention I now feel immense hatred for. The breathalyzer is second only to the answering machine, which has led to 3 separate breakups. It turned out that I was in fact intoxicated. I blew a 2.4, which far exceeds the legal limit of 0.8. Once handcuffed in the squad car next to Lydia, my blood really began to boil. So this is how it's going to go down, huh? Can't just turn around, drive the 50 yards back to my house and drop us off? No, of course not, because I fought the law and the law won. After a pause, I murmured racist under my breath, loud enough for both of them to hear. The cop in the passenger seat turned around with a confused look on his face. We're all white. Whatever, I said. Well, still, was Lydia's comeback. I'm Jewish, I told them. No response. Did you hear me? I said. This is racial profiling, and I won't be a party to it. Let me out. Anti-Samoans, Lydia yelled. You girls will be released when you sober up. You'll be charged with a DUI, Miss Handler, and your friend will be charged with being drunk and disorderly. Would you like us to add obstruction of justice to those charges, or would you two like to be quiet until we get down to the station? There better be air conditioning there, I mumbled. We're going to prison, Lydia bawled. She was still sobbing heavily. Don't worry, just calm down. My father's an attorney. No, he's not, Lydia replied. Shut up, I growled. What's going to happen to my car? I asked the officers. It will be impounded, the officer said. More great news, I huffed. Is this going to be an overnight thing? We'll release you girls when you sober up, replied the cop, who was driving. Well, then can we only stop by my apartment so I can get my contact solution, I asked him. Once again, both officers ignored me, and Lydia was now moaning like she had been mauled by a grizzly bear. As ridiculous and belligerent as Lydia was, I still felt bad for her. I have a very hard time maintaining my composure when I see anyone cry. It only takes a few seconds for me to start crying too, which has ruled out any chance of me becoming a rape crisis counselor. Okay, girls, let's get you booked, my cop said as we pulled up to the police station. He got out of the car and opened my door. Finally, some chivalry. We went through the motions of the fingerprints, photo shoot, and paperwork. Then we were thrown into a holding cell with one other woman who looked like Courtney Love's twin sister. What about our phone call? I asked the female officer who brought us 2 blankets. Would you like to make one? She asked. I looked at Lydia, who was already sleeping in the fetal position on her blanket. Yes, no, just forget it, I yelled, realizing no one we knew would be sober enough to pick us up. I looked at Courtney Love's doppelganger, biting her nails. She had no shoes on and her feet were filthy. She was wearing a white pleather miniskirt and sitting with her legs wide open. I smiled at her. Fuck off, was her response. Roger that, I said, and turned to lie down. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember an officer coming into our cell a couple of hours later when it was light out. Okay, Lydia Davis, you can go now. You're being released. Chelsea. Who's Chelsea? I sat up and raised my hand. Okay, yes. You're going to be transported downtown to Sybil Brand. Huh? What's that? That's the Los Angeles County Women's Prison, Courtney Love chimed in. What? Why? The female officer looked down at some paperwork in her hand. We ran your name in our computer, and there seems to be an outstanding warrant for your arrest for fraud. Something about using your sister's identification. Someone reported you to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You have been on the government's watch list for 1.5 years. The government's watch list? Don't you think that's a little dramatic? I was using it to get into bars, I exclaimed, now in tears. She gave it to me, I lied, trying to pin the blame on my sister. Well, it says here that she was the one who filed the complaint, the officer informed me. What? I couldn't believe what a nightmare my sister was. My own sister. How could she be so stupid? What was her problem anyway? It's not like I was using her license to rent apartments or apply for credit cards. All I want to do is get a little buzz going. There's a bus that comes down here after picking up the inmates in Malibu, and it will take you to Sybil Brand, where they will put you into the system, and you'll stay there until someone posts your bail. Bail? I asked. This was turning into a bad episode of Law & Order. How much is my bail? 10% of $100,000, which is $10,000, she told me. It's not bad, Courtney Love chimed in. Mine's $15,000. Don't worry, Chelsea, I'll figure it out, Lydia said. Now I was crying and Lydia hugged me. I'm not leaving you. I'll go to prison with you. You can't stay with me, I sniffled. Okay, she said and walked out. The policewoman shut the gate to our cell, and Lydia peered through 2 of the bars. We'll figure it out, Chelsea. Do you want me to call your dad? No. I did kind of want her to call my father because I want him to hit my sister, but I definitely didn't want him to know I got in a DUI. My aunt and uncle were lushes and lived in Bel Air with their 9 children. They'd be far more understanding. Call my aunt, I said to Lydia, as my mind shifted back and forth from how I was going to brush my teeth to whether or not I would have access to the internet in prison. There was much planning to be done if I was truly going to prison. My first priority was to start thinking about what kind of gang I would join. I hope my uncle wasn't still mad at me for choosing to have sex with a family friend instead of him when my cousins and I were playing Who Would You Rather Have Sex With? The Who Would You Rather Have Sex With game. The premise of the game is you have to choose between 2 people who you would rather have sex with, sober, or your entire family is killed. Usually the choice is between 2 real winners like David Hasselhoff and Gary Coleman. A couple of weeks prior, when my 14-year-old cousin Madison asked me if I would rather have sex with her dad, my uncle, or their family friend Rusty. I of course chose Rusty because he was not a relative. My uncle didn't take kindly to this, so Madison told him. He took it as a personal insult that I would rather have sex with someone I barely knew. We are related, I told him. That's really shitty, Chelsea, he replied as he took another sip of his double vodka and grapefruit. I've been like an uncle to you. You are my uncle, I reminded him. Not by blood, he replied. A couple hours later, a female officer came in and handcuffed me. The bus is here to take you to Sybil Brand. I hope you realize that you're making a big mistake, I told her. My father works for the Department of Sanitation. Well, then you should have no problem getting released. She smiled. She walked me on the bus and sat me down next to a Hispanic woman with 2 gold front teeth who looked like she was in her 90s. Then the female officer shackled our ankles together. Are you being serious? I asked her. Do you really think ankle cuffs are necessary? I am not an outlaw. Standard operating procedure, she replied. I looked around the bus at all the other prisoners. There were close to 20 women altogether. The only race not represented was Asian, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Mandarin and Cantonese are 2 dialects I knew wouldn't be easy to pick up, not to mention the pressure that would come with joining an Asian gang. This was years before the release of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and my martial arts weren't anywhere near the level they are today. I looked over at the woman shackled to my ankle and made the peace sign. She didn't respond, so I had no choice but to vocalize it. Peace, I said, leaning in to make sure she could hear me. Peace, she responded without looking in my direction. I turned around to look at the 2 black women sitting directly behind me. One looked like she'd only be a voice if she lost any more weight, and the other was about 400 pounds and looked like she was very close to eating the woman sitting next to her. I lifted my chin and jutted it in their direction. Word. A cold stare met my eyes from Fat Albert's sister, and the skinny woman kept staring out the window, shaking. You want to get bitch slapped, Barbie? Was the next thing I heard from a black woman sitting behind Fat Albert's sister. I was tempted to let Foxy Brown know it wasn't possible for anyone to bitch slap me with handcuffs on, but decided to keep a low profile. I turned around and wondered when Malibu had become so heavily integrated. The bus ride lasted for about 45 minutes, and I kept to myself the rest of the trip. It became clear that this wasn't my crowd, and that once I got to prison, I would have to find the girls with good teeth and run with them. Once we got to Sybil Brand, all 20 of us were put into a holding cell with benches, while they would call us out one by one to be booked and fingerprinted again. They unshackled us, and the minute Goldfinger was separated from me, she walked over to a corner of the room, pulled her pants down, and peed on the floor. It was quickly becoming apparent to me that this situation was much more serious than I had realized. This was turning into a full-blown episode of Survivor, Women of the Outback. Not only were some of these women behaving like wild Indians, but looking around the room, I knew that if I had any hopes of blending in here, I would have no choice but to get a tattoo. Soon after we arrived, an officer came in with a bunch of sandwiches covered in saran wrap. You would have thought these women were getting food airlifted in a war zone. One woman was knocked to the ground as others ran to the officer bearing sandwiches. How anyone could have a sandwich at a time like this was beyond my imagination. I stayed seated on my bench and watched this pandemonium in disgust. I avoided further eye contact with any of the women until finally my name was called. I was taken in to be booked and fingerprinted. Again, I tried explaining to the officer, taking my picture, that this was a huge mistake and that they shouldn't bother booking me, as I was going to be bailed out at any minute. That's what they all say, sweetie. I'm serious, I said as I turned my head to the side for my profile shot. My father is black. She told me it didn't matter what race my father was, and that even if my bail had already been posted, I couldn't be released until I was entered into the system. Next up was a strip search, or what I now refer to as anal rape. They took us in groups of 8 into another holding area where we were instructed to undress and stand a few feet away from each other in the buff. This news, of course, threw me into a hissy fit as I tried to piece together when I had last had a bikini wax. It had been at least a month, and I knew it was not going to be pretty. Even though I am not an extremely unkempt girl, I make it a personal rule to never allow others the displeasure of seeing my beaver in an unruly state. Turns out I had nothing to worry about. Once we were all undressed, I realized the true meaning of unruly. There were women in there who clearly had never heard of a razor, never mind a bikini wax. Head trimmers would have been a more appropriate tool for the situations going on in between some of these women's legs. One woman looked like she had buckwheat stuck in a leg lock. As each woman bent over and spread her ass cheeks, I wondered what the officers thought they would find. "I'm sorry," I blurted out. "I can tell you right now that I do not have anything inside my brown eye. You don't have to check it." "Ma'am, please turn around and bend over," the female officer said to me. "I just don't understand what you think you're going to find in there," I said, standing upright with both hands covering my asshole. "You'd be surprised, ma'am. Drugs, pills, money. Yesterday someone had a Game Boy up in there." "A Game Boy?" I asked, horrified. I turned around and tried to relax my butt cheeks. "Were the batteries in it?" "Uh-huh," she replied as she motioned for me to get into position. "I guess that gives new meaning to the term junk in your trunk." No one responded to my joke, which I thought was extremely clever. I turned around and bent over. It wasn't as unpleasant as I had expected, but I would have been much less inclined to put up a fight if the officer were male. Afterward, we were each given a bright orange two-piece prison suit and open-toed slippers. Fortunately, the slippers really showed off my pedicure, but the orange prison garb was a total nightmare for my skin tone. I found out years earlier that I was a summer, and the best colors for me were pastels. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 7:30 p.m. If I wasn't here, I would be leaving happy hour this very minute, most likely with someone of South American descent. Finally, they led the 8 of us into a room the size of a football field filled with rows of bunk beds. There were hundreds of women everywhere, and none of them looked Jewish. I was assigned to a top bunk in the middle of the room. The bottom bunk, I had to assume, was occupied by the large muscular woman doing one-arm push-ups next to it. I was given a bag of toiletries, and when I looked inside and didn't find a pair of eye shades, I nearly hit the roof. The situation was growing worse by the minute. I looked at G.I. Jane and asked her if there was a manager around. "Huh?" she asked. "Hi, sorry, I'm Chelsea," I said, putting out my hand. When she didn't meet my hand for a handshake, I asked her who was in charge around here. "Depends. What are you looking for?" "Well, I'm not supposed to be here, so I need to talk to whoever's in charge." "Go to the window up front. The guards don't know nothing." "Thanks," I said, and walked over to the glass partition at the front of the room, only to be stared at by every woman I passed. "She looks yummy," I heard someone say as I sped up and stared at the ground. I was in no mood to fight off a sexual abuser. Normally, I would never be one to report a rape, unless, of course, it ended badly. But if my attacker was a woman, that opened up an entirely new playing field. When I got to the booth, there were about 15 women in line ahead of me, waiting to speak with the 2 women behind the large glass partition. It struck me that this was exactly like the DMV, except we were all wearing the same jumpsuits. There was a large Mexican woman in front of me with a shaved head and tattoos covering both of her arms. She turned around and looked at me and didn't drop her stare for 30 seconds. I had already learned through trial and error that the conventional hello or word up didn't work here. So, to break the awkward silence, I had to try something new. "I like your head." She said something in Spanish and spit on my feet. Then she looked at me again for an uncomfortably long time. I gave her a closed-mouth smile to let her know I was totally cool with her spitting on me until she turned back around. She had 2 large knots above the roll of fat that connected her head to her shoulders, and her back was the size of a suitcase. This was the type of woman you'd want on your side if you were up against a crocodile. I looked around at all the inmates milling about. Some were in groups talking. One woman was rapping loudly with headphones on, and there was some sort of frenzy ensuing in the far corner of the room about 50 yards away. Then I heard yelling, "Ham and cheese sandwiches!" Again, I saw all the women flocking to one area as sandwiches flew through the air. Some landing on beds, some landing in people's outstretched hands. Everyone in line in front of me scattered and ran toward the sandwiches. It was a complete madhouse and gave whole new meaning to the word picnic. I, of course, seized this opportunity to get to the front of the line and get some answers. "Hello," I said to the officer sitting behind the partition. "I'm supposed to get bailed out shortly, so how exactly does that work?" The officer was a pretty black woman who didn't appear nearly as annoyed with me as everyone else seemed to be. "Well, someone needs to post your bail, and then we will be notified and you'll be released." "Well, I'm positive that my bail has already been posted, so can you check in the system and see?" "Name?" she asked as she wheeled the chair she was sitting in closer to her computer. "Chelsea Handler." "No bail has been posted," she told me after a couple of minutes. "That doesn't mean it hasn't been paid, but it's not in the system yet." "Well, how long does it take from being posted to get in the system?" "Sometimes a couple of hours, sometimes overnight. The system looks like it's down. You're definitely not getting out tonight. Better get yourself a sandwich before they run out." I was unsuccessfully trying to fight back tears. I turned to leave and then walked back to the window. "Do you know where I can get some eye shades?" I asked her. "Eye shades?" "Yes, I need them to sleep. I am extremely sensitive to light." "I don't know if they sell them at the commissary, but you can try. You need to have money in your account, which you don't have. Once you start working, you'll be able to purchase stuff from the commissary." That's where she lost me. I turned and walked toward the payphone. One woman was on the phone while another was yelling at her, "Get off the goddamn phone, you fucking bitch. Your 5 minutes is up." The officer with a sandwich cart was passing by and threw 3 sandwiches in our direction. I caught one thrown in my direction, took one look at the white bread with thumbprints on it, and tossed it in the trash bin next to me. "The fuck are you thinking?" asked the woman in front of me, waiting for the phone as she ran over and retrieved my sandwich from the trash. "You can trade that for something." Then she handed it back to me. "What can I trade it for?" "Candy, soda, pills, whatever," she said. Finally, someone was speaking my language. "What kind of pills?" I asked. The woman on the phone hung up, and the woman in front of me almost caught air lunging toward the phone. She picked it up and started dialing. I leaned forward and tapped her on the shoulder. "What kind of pills?" I asked again. She looked at her shoulder where I touched it and gave me a look that said any more contact with her would not be rewarded. When it was finally my turn to use the phone, I made a collect call to my aunt. My cousin Madison answered the phone, accepted the charges, and handed it to my aunt. I immediately started bawling. Being in jail was similar to being in a hospital bed. You're fine until you see or speak to someone from your family, and then you completely lose your shit. "When are you getting me out?" I asked her. "We're working on it. We had to put a lien on the house to get the money." "What's a lien?" "It's a loan, dipshit, against our mortgage," she explained. "Oh, shit." "It's fine, don't worry. We should have you out by the morning." Hearing for the second time in 10 minutes that I would be spending the night caused the same sting that I felt hearing it from the officer behind the window, and a new rupture of tears exploded. "Chelsea, are you okay?" my aunt demanded. "No," I wailed. "There are gangs here. People are trading sandwiches for tampons. It's complete chaos." And I took a deep breath. And I continued, "I'm sleeping in a bunk bed." "Chelsea, just try and get some sleep. We'll get you out of there as soon as we can. Dan's going to the bail bondsman first thing in the morning." I used the sandwich I was holding to wipe the tears off my face. "Do not tell my father," I told her. "He already knows," she told me. "He's fuming." "Oh, no." "Yeah, he's livid. He can't believe your sister's such a jackass." "Oh, really?" I asked, comforted by this development. "Yeah, he said he won't speak to her until she starts taking medication." "Oh, wow." "Hey, Smurfette, get off the fucking phone," a woman behind me yelled. I was so startled I didn't even say goodbye or hang up. I dropped the phone, took my sandwich, and hightailed it back to my bunk. I was much taller than Smurfette and preferred the Barbie nickname from earlier in the afternoon. It wasn't going to be easy to get any of these lunatics to take me seriously, but I was hell-bent on trying. I climbed up on my bed and put my head down on the pillow, which had the consistency of a pancake. I placed my sandwich under it for extra support. "You're not going to eat that?" asked a frosted, blonde-haired white woman in the top bunk next to mine, her mouth full of the sandwich she was already gnawing on. "Do you want it?" I asked, jumping at the opportunity to make a friend. "Shit, I'll take it," she said, and put out her hand. Her name was Lucille. "What are you in for?" I asked her. "Murder." The notion that someone who used a fake ID was put in a bed next to a killer was not lost on me. What kind of operation were they running here? I suddenly realized that this was what people were referring to with the phrase hard time. I searched my mind for the correct lingo to converse with the murderer. Who'd you knock off? I asked nonchalantly, trying to hide my fear by picking in between my toes and then smelling my fingers. My sister, the cunt, she said. Really? I'm thinking about killing mine. I told her as coolly as I could. Yeah, sister was a cunt, slept with my man. Did you kill the guy? No, I didn't get the chance. Would have, though, she said as she piled my whole sandwich into her mouth in one sweep. Right, I nodded. I didn't want to pry, yet I wanted to know how this frosted, blonde, petite woman murdered her sister and where in her body she was storing the 2 sandwiches she had just demolished. She couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, and she was about 5'6". This woman/killer was a testament to my theory that the crazier you are, the more calories you burn. That's why psychos are always so skinny. The best sandwiches are around Thanksgiving. That's when they use the real shit, she said. Yeah, well, I'm not going to be here over Thanksgiving. Yeah, that's what they all say, she told me. No, really, I told her I'm Jewish. Lights out in 10 minutes. Lights out in 10 minutes, someone announced over the loudspeaker. I hadn't gone to the bathroom since that morning before I got on the bus, and I knew I wouldn't be able to hold it in much longer. I had seen an open area that looked like a bathroom near the information booth, which I had made a personal pact with myself to try and avoid. I thought I could hold it if I didn't ingest any liquids. Do you want to go to the bathroom together? I asked Lucille. Sure, she smiled. I'll go to the bathroom with you. Ain't nobody gonna bother you. Oh, I'm not worried about that, I lied. I play karate. I'm a black belt. I wanted to trust Lucille, but knew if she had turned on her own sister, the chances of her turning on me were pretty strong. I wanted her to know that if it came down to it, I could protect myself. I've done time before, I added, as we headed toward the bathroom. Yeah, where? Lucille asked. I searched my mind trying to think of another prison. Alcatraz. Fuck. You don't know the half of it, I told her. There were a few stalls in the bathroom, as well as some open seating, but I opted for some privacy. The first stall I walked into looked like someone had just had a miscarriage. I walked out and chose the next one. I peed for about 3 minutes straight, and when I came out of the stall, Lucille was sitting on the toilet taking a dump. Hold on, she said with her teeth clenched. I'm just finishing up. This was obviously how she stayed so thin. She immediately shit out any food she consumed. Hand me some toilet paper. I grabbed some tissue and handed it to my new best friend. After she wiped her ass, she pulled up her pants and headed back out to the main room. I wanted her to wash her hands, but didn't want to be bossy. I'm just going to wash my hands, I said, hoping she would take the hint. Instead, she took a menthol cigarette out of her pocket and lit it. We walked back to our respective bunks and hopped in. I laid my head down facing Lucille, wondering if she was my prison soulmate. I was starting to understand the tales of lesbianism you hear on the outside. It made perfect sense that without any men around, women had only 2 options, weightlifting or other women. I wondered if Lucille and I would have a wedding ceremony by our bunk beds or in the cafeteria. I'll be so skinny by that time from all this self-starvation that I could probably fit into any gown my heart desired. Maybe Lucille and I could even fit into the same gown. I wasn't really attracted to her, but I had on occasion slept with guys I wasn't attracted to. Figured there wouldn't be a huge difference. I stared at her as she mashed her cigarette out on the side of her bedpost. So how'd you kill your sister? I asked, trying to make small talk with my future bride. With a hammer, she replied. Took the bitch a good 40 minutes to finally die. I was not prepared for that response. My body immediately went into shock. It was everything I could do not to vomit. The only time my body had this reaction was when I was 10 years old, and my next-door neighbor pulled down his pants and showed me his penis. But even then, I was less taken aback. I leaned my head over the edge of my bed, gagging, but nothing was coming out. I knew this was not the appropriate reaction to Lucille's declaration. I put my hand up to say I was okay until moments later, when I finally stopped heaving. Lucille was sitting on her bed looking at me. I racked my brain trying to come up with an excuse for my reaction, but Was so thrown off guard, I just put my head back down on my pillow and said, we should definitely keep in touch after I leave tomorrow. Then I rolled over and cried myself to sleep. Thought about how lucky my sister was that Lucille wasn't in our family. I wanted to hug Sloane tightly and tell her, you stupid, stupid girl. Do you know that under no circumstance would I ever hammer you? I woke up very early the next morning and opened my eyes. I looked around the room, trying to think of a situation that could be any worse than this, and decided that the only thing that could be worse than prison was the Navy. I looked over and Lucille wasn't in her bed. I grabbed my bag of toiletries and went straight to the bathroom. I had to pee and I desperately needed to floss. Once I was done washing my hands, I heard my name being called over the loudspeaker along with 5 or 6 others. Finally, I exclaimed and ran over to the glass booth where a guard was waiting with a clipboard. I stood there while we waited for the other girls called to find their way over, thinking about how thin I felt. One more day of this, and my stomach would officially be concave. I loved it. Once the others arrived, the guard led us out a door, down a hall, and down 2 flights of stairs into what looked like a principal's office. My name was called rather quickly, and I went into the office, sitting down across from a Latina woman in her 40s. Hi, I said with a bounce in my step. Hi, Miss Handler, she said, looking up at me with what I took to be sympathy, finally. Yep, that's me, I said, shaking my head at the injustice of it all. Okay, there are a couple of options. Do you have any special skills? Skills? Not really, no. I'm good at reading. I can type pretty fast. I'm not sure what you're asking me, I asked, confused. Well, you're here for work placement, so there are different things to choose from. You could work in the kitchen, or you could work in the industrial shop, where you could make anything from license plates to wooden wood chimes, or you can enroll in school and get your GED. What are you talking about? No, I'm not working here. You don't seem to understand. First of all, I'm supposed to be getting bailed out this morning. I do not want a job making wood chimes or fixing cars. And I already graduated from high school. Barely, but I did, so I don't need a GED. I want to go home. I just want to go home. What exactly is the problem with you people? Listen, Miss Handler, everyone thinks they're going home. But the reality of the situation is that 85% of the inmates booked end up spending a minimum of 6 months here. And if you want to start earning money, the best thing for you is to get a job. That was it. I stood up and placed my hands on her desk. Listen up, Miracle Ear, I told her. I spoke to my aunt last night. She's already paid the money to get me out, okay? I'm waiting for them to release me at any minute. That is the situation. So for all I care, you can put my name down to plant prison flowers or style inmates' hair or head up the women's fucking field hockey team. I am not staying here. Next, she said as she shuffled some paperwork. I walked outside her office and sat down. I was incensed, and I also really wanted my mommy. Why wasn't anyone getting the fact that I would not be taking up permanent residence in a women's prison? I looked up at the ceiling. Are you there, Vodka? It's me, Chelsea. Please get me out of jail, and I promise I'll never drink again. Drink and drive. I'll never drink and drive again. I may even start my own group fashioned after MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. But I'll call it AWLTDASH, Alcoholics Who Like to Drink and Stay Home. When we were taken back to the main room, there weren't many women there. Apparently it was breakfast time, but I opted to go back to bed. As I climbed back into my bunk, I wondered how much weight I had lost already. Would people even recognize me when I was released? I daydreamed about what it would be like when my father finally saw what my body had been reduced to. I even considered shaving my head for a more dramatic effect. You have no idea what it was like, Dad. Some of this stuff, I can't even say. I would take long pauses while looking down and shaking my head. I would imply that there was penetration, possibly sodomy, if not only to play the sympathy card for years to come, but also to remind everyone that my sister was an alien and needed to be excommunicated from our family. I dozed off and was awakened moments later by Lucille smacking me in the face. No! I screamed. Your name. They're calling you to be released. My eyes lit up bigger than the first time I had seen John Bon Jovi perform live. I jumped off the bed and started to run toward the booth. Wait, Lucille yelled. Aren't you even going to say goodbye? I turned and ran back to give her a hug, but was dumbstruck when she planted her lips directly on top of mine and held them. My arms fell to my side, and I waited for her to finish kissing me. There were hoots and hollers coming from the women around us, and one of them yelled out, "Hammer Time's got a girlfriend. Hammer Time's got a girlfriend." "I'll email you," I said as I slowly backed away. "Barbie's going home to her daddy," a large black woman with dreadlocks yelled as I was taken by an officer out of the room and downstairs to an outbooking room, where I was handed a bag filled with the clothes I had come in wearing. 20 minutes later, I walked out the doors of Los Angeles County Women's Prison, otherwise known as Sybil Brand Correctional Facility, into the bright sunlight. I wondered who exactly Sybil Brand was and who she had pissed off in order to have an entire women's prison named after her. I made a mental note to Google her later. I saw Lydia's car parked at the far end of a circular driveway. Upon seeing me, she and my friend Ivory jumped out and started running toward me with their arms outstretched like a scene out of Chariots of Fire. "Thank goodness I'm alive," I cried. "Thank goodness I'm alive." The whole way to the car, Lydia and Ivory were telling me how horrible the past 36 hours had been for them, and how they both had to call in sick to the restaurant where we all worked. "Does everyone know I was in jail?" I asked. "Yeah, Chelsea," Ivory said. "We got together a fund and everyone chipped in, even Hermano, the busboy. We were worried your aunt wasn't going to get the money fast enough, so we started asking everyone." "How much did you get?" I asked her. $55. "None of us are ever driving drunk again," Lydia said. "We're all taking taxis from now on. Well, for a while anyway." "I don't want you guys to be jealous," I told them, trying to distract myself from the fact that they could only raise $55 on my behalf. "But I've made a new friend. Her name is Lucille. We already kissed on the mouth." "Oh my gosh," Lydia exclaimed, looking back at me. "Were you raped?" "Face raped," I proclaimed as I got in the passenger seat of Lydia's car. I wanted to go home as soon as possible and weigh myself. I went to court about 3 months later, when I was given my sentence: 500 hours of community service, a fine of $2,500, and 3 months of DUI school. My favorite of the 3 was DUI school. The instructor was a small Asian man who repeated one thing at the beginning and end of each class: "Under no circumstances, when being pulled over by the police, do you admit to having had anything to drink." Advice I would have valued much more had I received it months prior to getting my DUI. But still I valued it all the same.